In the 60s, Eastside High School is one of the most successful schools in Paterson, New Jersey. Joe is a teacher in this school, and his class adores him because he teaches important things with kindness but also fun competitions. One morning, his class is interrupted by fellow teacher Frank, who tells him they're holding a meeting of the union executive board without them. Furious, Joe bursts into the meeting and yells at everyone for not supporting his reform ideas and always giving up as soon as the local government asks them to keep things quiet. Tired of Joe's behavior, the board agrees to transfer him to another school. 20 years later, Eastside High has deteriorated to the point where it's called a cauldron of violence. The building itself has lost its shine, and the students don't know the meaning of good behavior. Bullying and violence are in every hall. They don't listen to teachers and even beat them up when they try to intervene, and illegal substances and arms are dealt as if they were candy. Most of the students can't pass the minimum basic skills test. And this is bad news for Mayor Botman, who doesn't want to lose the school to state administration because it'll cost him the election. Frank, now school superintendent, and Mr. Rosenberg, the school board attorney, arrive at the only logical conclusion: they must bring Joe back. Botman didn't like this idea, but he accepted it because he had no other choice. Frank and Rosenberg go to Joe and offer him the job of principal at Eastside, but Joe refuses, explaining that he knows the mayor only wants to save him, not the children. However, Frank changes his mind by pointing out that so far Joe hasn't made any difference with his whole Crazy Joe routine, and that he shouldn't consider it is the reason why I fell. The next day, Joe shows up at Eastside as the new principal. He holds a meeting with the other teachers and immediately puts his tyranny on the line by saying that he was the only one who spoke in his meeting. After requesting a list of names of all students involved in criminal activity, he ordered the guard to wipe down the walls and asked any detained students to help him. Mr. Darnell, an English teacher, was demoted to assistant football coach. There will be guards in the hallways to help prevent violence, and all teachers must focus on preparing students for the next standardized test, because the school needs 75% approval, and last time they did it, less than 40. Joe then called a whole school meeting in which all the troublemakers on the list were brought on stage. When Joe arrives, he runs into Kenesha, who is happy to see him because he is the principal of her elementary school. Joe goes on stage and asks for silence, but no one pays attention to him, and the troublemakers laugh when he asks them to sing the school song. Deciding they are beyond repair, Joe decides to expel all the troublemakers, promising the remaining kids that no one will bother them again. Security takes all the students left the scene, and this was enough to calm things down, especially when Joe tells them that they could be next if they don't study hard. In the afternoon, Joe had a meeting with all the parents. Liana, the mother of one of the expelled children, was angry at what had happened, and many parents supported her. But Joe doesn't give in and gives a speech about how a few bad apples spoil the whole basket. He explained that he had expelled 300 children to save 2,700 and that he had promised God to save this school. This speech received support from most parents, but Liana was still angry. The next day, Joe goes to school and finds a kid waiting for him. Sams has been expelled and is now trying to tell Joe that he made a mistake because he didn't do anything, but Joe knew he was lying and took him to the roof with him. He calls Sams a coward for not telling his parents that he was expelled from school and tells him that using these illegal substances will kill him, so if he wants to die to that point, he should jump away. Sams obviously refuses and promises that he will do better, and Joe agrees to give him a second chance, but if he makes a mistake again, he will be gone forever. During lunch, Joe went from table to table listening to what students had to say and offering some advice. He was happy to see Ray wearing a suit, which set a great example, unlike Sams and his friends who dressed sloppily. When he notices they're bothering a girl, Joe makes them stand up and announce their clothing choices in front of everyone, then asks them to sing the school song. He also reminded the class that no one was to move during the school song, so when Darnell bent down to pick up trash, Joe told him to go to his desk. The boys don't know the lyrics anyway, causing Joe to take detention and inform everyone that from now on they must all be ready to sing the school song on command, or there will be consequences. Joe then goes to see music teacher Elliot to tell him about the new rule. Elliot accepts that, but she will teach the school song after they finish practicing for the upcoming choir concert in New York. The children practice Mozart, and Elliot wants his work to be respected. She calls Joe, telling him that he doesn't like other adults standing up to him, and Joe responds by firing her and canceling the concert so the students can focus on their upcoming test. From now on, pianist Ms. Powers will be in charge of the music class. Later, in a meeting with Darnell, Joe is challenged again. Darnell thinks he is being treated like trash and wants the principal to remember that these are his students too. This ends with Darnell being suspended from school. Assistant Principal Joan tries to talk sense into Joe, explaining that Darnell is more than just a coach and no one understands what Joe does. But Joe responds that that's exactly the way he likes it. The day of the practice exam arrived and all the students completed the test as best they could while the teacher closely supervised. Joe didn't want to wait long for the results, so he sent Joan to the school board to directly request the letter. One morning, a student's special presentation to the local press is interrupted by an attack in the cafeteria. One of the boys who had been expelled from school came back and hit Ray. He also had a knife. Joe quickly caught him and wondered how he was safe. The security guard told him that someone must have let him in from the inside. At that moment, Joe decided that all the doors in the school would be locked and chained. Sometime later, Joe saw Kenesha sad. She was a smart girl, but her grades weren't good since she lost her place because her mother didn't want her. Determined to help, Joe takes Joan to meet Kenesha's mother at her house. The mother explains that she had Kenesha when she was a teenager, so she had to give up her normal life to do job. Now she is trying to abstain, but it puts her in a terrible mental state. That's why she thinks it's best to send Kenesha to childcare facilities, but she never stops wanting her near or loving her. Joe promises to help her find a better job and a better place to live as long as she takes Kenesha back and helps her focus on her studies. News of the chained doors hits the paper and Liana takes the opportunity to file a complaint with the school board. Frank scolds Joe for his crazy behavior, mentioning that Liana is organizing a group to kick him out and the fire chief is on her side. He thinks Joe is alienating everyone like he did his wife, so now he's going to write a letter of apology to Elliot and Darnell, because if Joe wants to be respected as an authority figure, he should start by respecting authority too. Darnell is reinstated, but the matter is not over. The fire chief shows up at the school with the press, so Joe makes him leave by threatening him with a stick. Joan tries to express her concern about this attitude, but as usual, she is ignored. Joe is very disappointed. The next time he sees Ray is when the boy comes to say goodbye because he can't stay in this school. Later, Joe sees Sam's and his friends having fun in the bathroom. He makes them sing the school song and is shocked to hear a beautiful performance done in the style of a church choir. The boys admitted that Powers taught them it, so Joe went to her to congratulate her and ask her to teach everyone this version of the song from now on. The practice test results come in and Joe is disappointed to see they only scored 33%. He called all the teachers to the gym and told them that their ineffectiveness was the cause of these poor results, so they needed to train harder. Joe wanted to start a tutoring program and a remedial reading class on Saturdays, but a teacher pointed out that it would be difficult to get the kids to come on the weekends. His plan: he is giving them to each class of students and talk to parents to get them involved, maybe even invite them along if they can't read. During the following weeks, teachers and students worked hard to prepare for the test and Joe bonded with his students as much as possible. This was not enough for Liana, who along with the fire chief went to speak directly to Botman. Frank and Rosenberg try to defend Joe, but Botman kicks them out of the meeting and comes to an agreement with Liana that she will not convince the town not to vote for him. Botman will fire Joe and Liana will rally everyone's support for her campaign. Later in the bathroom, Botman tells the fire chief that they will arrest Joe for illegal chains after the inspection, unaware that Rosenberg was in one of the stalls and heard everything. Rosenberg informs Frank about this and they go to warn Joe, who quickly comes up with a plan. When the security guards see the sheriff arriving, they will call code 10 over the radio and the teachers will have you temporarily remove the chain. Later, Joan tries to talk to Joe about the progress of their reading program, but he tells her that he is too busy to deal with it right now and that his assistant principal should finish the job, work without needing him all the time. At the end of the day, Joan asks Joe for a transfer, explaining how unpleasant he was to work with. She calls him an egomaniacal, a windbag whipped at those who couldn't fight back, and pointed out that half the staff felt the same way. They hadn't left yet because they cared about the children. However, Joan was fed up with his lack of respect and support for teachers, so she wanted to resign. The next day before the meeting, Joe gave Joan his transfer papers. He then gives a speech to the children about the town school's bad reputation, urging them to prove that they are not savages. He also expressed his gratitude to the teachers to whom he credited Joan. Then Powers sang "Lean on Me," and the children sang excitedly to prove to the government that they were not inferior. Seeing the whole school gathered, Joan decided to stay. On exam day, the students confidently took the exam. But there was also a school board meeting coming up and Liana couldn't wait any longer. So Botman finally gave the captain permission to the fire department requested a court order. Meanwhile, at school, Kanisha finds out she's pregnant, but her boyfriend doesn't believe he's the father even though she swears he's the only guy she dated over the summer. Joe offers his support and promises that they will find other alternatives. But their conversation is interrupted by a guard announcing the arrival of the fire chief along with Liana and the journalists. Calling a code 10, Joe tries to get the chain off, but the sheriff is ready and has a recording of the code. So Joe is arrested for violating fire regulations, leaving Joan in charge. That evening, the school board holds a meeting. Frank tries to defend Joe's job, but Liana points out that the school only got a 33% on the practical test, meaning Joe really failed his job. The meeting is abruptly interrupted when all the students show up to demand Joe's release. Botman knows it would be bad if they fired a man with such support, so he talks to Joe, asking him to ask the students to leave. When Joe refused, Botman brought out a large gun and explained that the police were preparing outside. If students riot, things could get violent. Joe agrees to talk to them, but only for their safety, not because he thinks they are doing anything wrong. When he goes out, Liana talks to the children, but she is only insulted and reminds him of all Joe has done for the school. He is very touched when he hears them calling he's a dad, but he's still worried about the police. So Joe takes over and reminds them to respect the law. His speech is suddenly interrupted by Joan, who brings the test results with great news. The school passed. As everyone celebrates, Joe tells Botman that he and the gang can go to hell. Joe keeps his job and the students end the evening by singing the school song. When it was time for the seniors to graduate, Joe presented diplomas with kind words tailored to each student. Thanks for watching and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.